There is something already pressed into the flesh of an open hand that has been extended toward you from the very beginning. And I need you to sit with that for just a moment before we go anywhere else. Because this is not the kind of conversation that moves quickly. This is the kind that asks you to be still, while something ancient and real rearranges itself inside the part of you that has been silently aching for far too long. The mark is not coming. It is not somewhere in a heavenly queue waiting for you to accumulate enough righteous days to finally deserve a glimpse of it. It has already been carved. It is already bleeding with presence. And right now, in this exact moment, the hand it lives in is stretched across the entire distance between heaven and the room you are sitting in, reaching toward you with a patience that does not grow weary, and a love that does not require your performance before it will show itself. So before this moment closes, I want you to lean in. I want to show you something that has been hiding not in the clouds, not in the extraordinary, but in the very grain of reality that you have been walking through every single day without recognizing it for what it truly is. Type 333 in the comments if you believe that God has never stopped reaching toward you. Because what I am about to share has the potential to permanently shift the weight you have been carrying. There is a fear that a great number of people carry so deeply inside themselves that they have stopped even naming it aloud. It lives beneath conversation. It lives in the space between prayers that trail off without resolution. It is the fear that maybe the silence is the answer. Maybe the absence of thunder means the throne room is actually empty. Maybe every gentle moment that felt almost like a sign was just your own longing constructing a story to keep itself warm through the long, cold nights of uncertainty. A woman has been lighting a single candle every evening and asking, just quietly, just in a whisper she would be embarrassed to let anyone else hear, whether the man she buried is held somewhere, whether love survives death, whether she is still seen in her aloneness. And the curtain shifts softly near the window, but she cannot be certain whether it was wind or grace. And the uncertainty costs her something every single night. A young man has been sitting in a hospital corridor for hours, leaning his whole tired body against a wall that separates him from the room where someone he loves is fighting. And he sent his heart out like a bird and waited. And he thought for a second he heard something, a whisper so faint he couldn't trust his own hearing. And he went home that night not knowing whether the God he was raised to believe in was actually in that corridor with him, or whether he had been alone the whole time. An older man stopped asking entirely, not because the desire went away, but because the asking had become too humiliating to continue when nothing seemed to come back. He had been told as a young person that God speaks to those who are worthy enough to receive it. And so every unanswered morning became a quiet verdict on the condition of his soul. And eventually, he decided it was less painful to simply stop, expecting a response, than to keep sending his heart out into what felt like an indifferent sky. I see every single one of those rooms. Not one of those prayers was misrouted. Not one of those whispers fell short of the ears they were aimed at. The pierced hand of my son has not fumbled a single one. Your prayers reached, every one of them, and the reply that has been forming is not what you were trained to look for, which is why you kept missing it. And I need to take a moment here to explain why the signs were not what you expected them to be. Type 777 if you have ever felt like your prayers were landing in silence. Because what I am about to tell you about the nature of divine communication is something that very few teachers have ever had the courage to say plainly. You were taught that signs come with drama: the burning bush, the parted water, the pillar of fire visible from a distance. And because none of that interrupted your ordinary Tuesday morning, you walked away from the devotional or the sermon or the prayer meeting with a small, invisible bruise, a place inside you that quietly concluded that the spectacular is reserved for the specially qualified, and you were not among them. But here is what nobody told you. The loudest thing I have ever said to humanity, the deepest evidence I have ever offered that I am not a distant, indifferent, theatrical presence waiting to be impressed by your spiritual performance, was not written in fire. It was written in flesh. It was inscribed into a body on a Friday afternoon outside a city wall 2,000 years ago, and it has not faded since. And it is still the primary, central, non-negotiable proof that I love you, that I see you, that I have never once looked away from your life or treated your need as an inconvenience or your asking as something that needs to be earned before it is honored. The wound is the sign. That is the sentence that I want to live inside you after this conversation ends. Not a parking space appearing at the right moment. Not a check arriving in the right week. Not a symptom resolving within the expected window. Those things are real, and I do send them and they matter, but they are footnotes attached to a much older and much deeper message. A message that was completed and sealed and is now permanent. A message that reads, I was willing to be broken for you, which means I am not going to abandon you in your ordinary afternoon, not when your kitchen feels like an empty room and the curtain is just a curtain, and the silence has been going on long enough that you have started to believe it is your fault. It is not your fault. Let me explain where that belief actually came from. Somewhere in your formation, a voice taught you that divine communication is a privilege distributed based on merit. Maybe it was a preacher who stood at a pulpit and described his extraordinary encounter with the supernatural, the vision, the audible voice, the undeniable confirmation, and you walked home afterward feeling somehow smaller, wondering why your own life had produced none of that, concluding without anyone having to say it directly that you must not yet have done enough to qualify. Maybe it was a theological framework that separated believers into tiers. The ones who fasted long enough and prayed loud enough and suffered beautifully enough to receive direct divine communication. And the ones who were still working their way toward that level, still in the outer court, still not quite holy enough for the inner room. Maybe it was an elder in your life who genuinely loved you, but passed along a limited picture of God. A picture painted not from personal encounter, but from inherited tradition. A tradition that imagined the divine as fundamentally withholding, as a presence that tests your endurance before it reveals its warmth. None of those voices were speaking from inside my heart when they said those things. Some of them were doing their best with what they had been given. Some of them needed your sense of spiritual inadequacy to keep you tethered to their system. Either way, the portrait they handed you was inaccurate, and I want you to set it down right now. Tilt it face first against the wall. Let it rest there while we keep talking, because the picture of who I am and how I communicate with the people I love looks nothing like what that portrait described. And the difference between the two is the difference between a life spent straining toward a God who is always just out of reach, and a life lived with the knowledge that the wound is already visible, the hand is already extended, the love has already demonstrated its willingness to pay the highest price for your belonging. Drop one word in the comments right now. Just the word "seen." Let it be a small marker that something real is landing inside you as we move through this together. I want to take you now to a specific moment, a moment that happened inside a room where a small group of people had just experienced the most disorienting few days of their lives. Someone they loved had been killed. Someone they had built their entire understanding of the world around had been taken from them in a way that was violent and public and seemingly final. And then, impossibly, he came back. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, not as a warmth in the chest, but bodily, physically, in a room with a closed door, standing among them and speaking with a voice they recognized. And one of his closest friends was not there for that first appearance. And when the others found him afterward and told him what they had seen, his heart did what sincere and wounded hearts do. It asked for evidence, not because he was a bad person, not because he was spiritually deficient, not because his faith was weaker than everyone else's, but because love had been taken from him in a way that had left something broken inside him, and he could not afford to be deceived again. And so he said, "Unless I put my finger into the place where the nails went through, I will not believe." And he carried that condition for 8 days, 8 days of silence, 8 days of watching the others live in a joy he could not access because he could not yet afford to trust the report. And on the 9th day, the one he was waiting for came back into the room and walked directly to him, not with rebuke, not with a lecture on the smallness of his faith, with an open hand, with an invitation. Put your finger here. Look at what love was willing to receive for your sake. And the word that came out of that friend's mouth was not a sophisticated theological declaration. It was simply, "My Lord and my God," because the wound was the proof. Because a love that is willing to be marked for you is a love that you can finally trust. And the same invitation is extended to you right now, in this moment, across 2,000 years. Put your finger here. Look at the hand. The wound is still there, and it is still speaking, and it is still the primary evidence that you are seen and held and not forgotten. Type 444 if you have ever had a moment where you suddenly just knew that you were not alone, even when you had no rational explanation for the knowing, because that moment was not coincidence, and it was not your own mind constructing comfort. That was the wound becoming briefly visible inside the fabric of your ordinary day. Now, I want to bring you to a letter, an old letter, written by a man who, by the time he picked up the pen, was carrying more miles in his body than most people carry in a lifetime. He had been shipwrecked. He had been imprisoned. He had been beaten in ways that leave evidence on the surface of a human body, welts that fade into ridges, ridges that become part of the map of who you are. He had planted communities of people across an entire region and had watched outside voices come in after him and begin to undo the simple, costly gospel he had laid down, replacing it with a system of requirements, a series of credentials that people were expected to demonstrate before they could consider themselves truly belonging to the family. And he wrote back to one of those communities with everything he had, reviewing the argument from the ground up, defending the freedom they had been given, refusing to concede a single inch to a framework that made belonging conditional on performance. And then at the very end of the letter, when the professional secretary had set down the pen, and this old, tired, marked man picked it up himself, he wrote one final sentence in his own handwriting, a sentence heavy with the weight of a life lived inside a love that cost him everything. And the sentence was this: "From now on, let no one cause me any more trouble because I carry on my body the marks of Jesus." Sit inside that for a moment. Do not rush past it. From now on, there is a closing in those words. There is a door being shut on a particular kind of conversation, the kind where people demand that you produce your credentials, the kind where your belonging is perpetually in question and perpetually subject to review by people who did not author the covenant that granted it to you in the first place. He is not declining to serve. He is not withdrawing from love. He is refusing to keep submitting his identity to verification systems operated by people who were never qualified to read the document. And the credential he offers is not a list of his accomplishments. It is not a record of his theology. It is not a summary of his spiritual experiences. It is a body. It is the evidence written onto his flesh by a life lived in proximity to a wounded Savior. The marks of Jesus. Notice what he does not say. He does not say the marks of my faithfulness. He does not say the marks of my sacrifice. He says the marks of Jesus, because the wounds on his body were not trophies of his own endurance. They were echoes. They were the faint impressions left on a person who walks closely enough to the one who bears the original wound, that some of that wound begins to leave its signature on the walker too. His credential of belonging is not a strength he manufactured. It is a love he was willing to be marked by. And I want to say to those of you who have been told that your lack of dramatic spiritual experience disqualifies you, that your ordinary life is evidence of your spiritual inadequacy, that the real believers get the visions and the voices while you get nothing. I want to say this directly and without softening it at all. That teaching was never mine. It did not originate from inside my heart. It was constructed by people who needed your sense of disqualification to keep you dependent on what they were offering. The ordinary life you are living is not a waiting room. It is the territory where the wound keeps showing up in small, consistent, unmistakable ways if you know how to look. A stranger who appears at exactly the moment when the loneliness was becoming unbearable. A song that reaches into a part of you that you had not known was waiting to be reached. A phone call from someone who had no logical reason to reach out on that specific afternoon. An unexpected, sourceless peace that arrived in the middle of a moment that should have broken you entirely. These are not coincidences. These are not your own mind generating comfort from its reserves of wishful thinking. These are the footnotes of the wound. These are the pierced hand briefly making contact with the surface of your ordinary day to remind you that the primary evidence is still there, still extended, still speaking in a language that is older and more reliable than thunder. I want to pause here and speak to someone specifically, someone who is carrying a child who has wandered into a life that has moved so far from everything you prayed over them that you have started to wonder whether your prayers have any purchase on reality at all. I want you to hear this with the clearest possible ears. The same hand that carries the scar is holding your child right now. They have not slipped past the wound. They live inside the same purchased love that bled for them before they ever drew breath. Stay in the chair. Keep the prayers going. A hand that was willing to receive nails is not going to loosen its grip on what it has already claimed. And to the one who is reading this from a place of physical